Every time we get into a policy debate about higher taxes for the wealthiest earners, one of the loudest talking points that comes out of that from the opposition is that rich people will just pack up and leave if they have to pay higher taxes. And wouldn't you know it, it's just not true. In 2023, the state of Massachusetts passed an additional 4% surtax on income of over $1 million. Before we get into what happened, I want to talk briefly about the political narrative surrounding all this. People think this is just such a ridiculous burden on society or whatever, but that's because they listen to conservative talking points that are funded by the wealthy people who don't want to pay more in taxes. There really aren't a lot of people who make $1 million a year. It's like funny to me to even think about that, but a lot of people who don't really look into the numbers and into reality, then I guess, yeah, maybe rich people paying taxes is just alarming somewhat. According to the data that we have from tax returns, there were 800,000 Americans who reported income of $1 million or more in 2022. That's actually doubled from 470,000 people in 2013, which is just about 10 years. But there are 340 million people in America. So that's 0.25% of the population. It's also just 0.5% of all taxpayers in 2022. In Massachusetts, it's about 76 people per 10,000 taxpayers. This is a ridiculously small, tiny little bit of people. So what happened in Massachusetts after the state enacted the so-called Millionaires tax? Well, the state raised $5.7 billion. Last year alone, projections were at $1.3 billion, but ended up exceeding that total to reach $3 billion. All of this extra funding is now legally going straight to state projects. It has to in education and transportation infrastructure. Let's take another example that conservatives hate to see anyone talking about, and that's the Scandinavian countries who practice the successful form of social democracy and are constantly ranked at the top of the list in terms of life satisfaction. And those countries pay upward of more than half of their income in taxes, and not just the wealthy, everybody. And then they get services and returns for those high tax rates, which, no surprise, makes you feel pretty secure in your life, and then it lets you worry about spending money on other things, like stuff you like. And you get to not worry about going bankrupt over medical debt, which is still a very uniquely American phenomenon, by the way. Let's take another example that conservatives totally hate, and that is the fact that a Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, oversaw the second highest tax rates in the United States history on the wealthiest Americans at an effective 90% rate. In doing so, he successfully leveraged a post-war boom that, along with the social infrastructure spending from FDR's public works programs and the New Deal, caused such an enormous injection of capital into the US economy that it propelled the nation to become the singular world power on the global stage. And now we have Zohran Mamdani, who's the duly elected mayor of New York City, telling us that he wants to tax the rich here in the city, and the cycle of propaganda from moneyed interest spins around and round again. Right-wing business folks say that we just can't do it for whatever reason, and the numbers and reality show us that we easily can, and that we'd raise a ton of capital for a lot of really necessary infrastructure improvements and positive social change. One thing Mamdani said in a campaign speech once that I thought was particularly good was this gem here. Billionaires have poured millions of dollars into this race because they say that we pose an existential threat, and I am here to admit something. They are right. We are an existential threat to billionaires who think their money can buy our democracy. And honestly, I would take that a step further to say that taxation should be an existential threat to billionaires. And not just because they use their power and influence to sway elections, but also because they use their wealth and influence to enable increasingly antisocial behavior and turn their backs on the necessary civic and socioeconomic responsibilities of living in a human civilization. I believe that if you're rich enough that you can choose not to participate in the real world with the rest of us, then you're far too rich. And yeah, that means you get taxed until everyone else gets to benefit from the unearned capital that more than likely you just inherited from your dad, who got it from his dad, and so on. So there you go. Nobody moves out when the taxes come in. The millionaires aren't uprooting themselves to make a political point. One or two here and there, probably, sure, they're gone, but they'll be replaced by others who care and do want to participate in our systems, and they won't take their ball and go home. It's really past time that we stop listening to baseless talking points. And to do that, we have to learn to recognize them when they come at us. So take some time to explore the numbers and look into the real data, and just never stop fact-checking politicians who tell you that things can't be done because they got bazillions of dollars from wealthy industry lobbyists in exchange for lying to you about that. Let's do some good about taxing millionaires and getting that sweet, sweet revenue so we can have things like bridges that won't keep collapsing. I'll see you next time.